a development agreement that's coincident with the annexation. I've seen that before. Typically, I've seen it often, in fact, I've seen it often. Typically, that an applicant is the initiator of the conversation about a development agreement because they're looking for some certainty around the development regulations. Often it wasn't related to residential development, but sometimes it was, because maybe it was a large area and it was gonna take some time to build it out, and they have to get their financing lined up, and they can't have the rules changing on them when they're making a big investment. So they would want certainty about the rules. So you can do a development agreement, and this is the question I would have for our attorney that Councilman Boger might be able to answer right off the top of his head, because this is what he does. And he used to advise me in Vancouver on this stuff. And that is, could you require a development agreement as part of this annexation? You might be able to do that. And if you did, then you'd be looking for that sweet spot of what are the deal points of that development agreement relative to what are the general standards that you have already put in place that in theory are supposed to meet the vision of the community. And we may need to revisit some of those, and I've heard you say that before, actually, council member, so.
I want to put in a plug for the Planning Commission. I think they've got their heads screwed on straight. I think they do a great job. They're a bunch of volunteers, and I think they've brought forward a plan here which works. I like their emphasis on not interfering with the market. And historically, that's been our Planning Commission's position, going back to the time when I was on it. I think, and many of the people that were on it then are on it now. So I would not like to see us put additional restrictions on this thing. If you do, you're risking the developer going elsewhere, and I don't want to see that. I think it's good to have development in the city. I'm sorry, thank you.
Yep. I have a question for Dave. So you're advocating for annexing in as R16 properties, just as it is?
As much as I dislike the 16, yes, I
Okay.
am. Talk me out of it.
Well, they're just extremely small lots. However, you know, there's a lot of retirees that could potentially move into smaller places with smaller yards, and they really don't want larger homes. So, I mean, I can see where there would be a positive as well.
Most of the retirees that are coming to Washougal from out of state are coming from real estate rich areas. And they bring with them a lot of equity that they cashed out of their house. And they tend to buy larger houses on sites with views and that sort of thing.
Are there any views up there?
I don't think so here.
Yeah, if you get clear up to the top that's been cleared.
At the woods, if you like the woods, there's a view.
If you like the woods.
Well, they cut the woods
I
down,
do. Did they log all that off?
but quite a bit of it. I think you can see down to the river now, at least from Woodburn Road.
What can we do about that?
Okay.
Other questions for Mitch? Next steps.
Yeah, so the next steps is I would bring that, would be looking at bringing that back at our next meeting for you to take that action to either accept, reject, or geographically modify. And then we'll bring it forward.
And
Michelle?
is that the time where that really is the decision point for the council as to whether or not they want this to come in at that zoning?
Yes.
You wouldn't you wouldn't direct staff to go out and do these petitions and expend all of that energy in good faith with the property owners that have requested annexation if you were in doubt about whether you were going to actually annex it or not. So that would be the real decision point. So there may be some additional information we need to bring forward based on some of the questions that we've heard. And I think we can work that out. Otherwise, you were going to put that on consent.
No,
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 it's a
it would be
hearing.
an actual it's not a hearing, but it's an action that the council has to take.
Okay. Do we need another workshop?
Well, if the area, I assume that's kind of northeast up there, but that top area that you say is unbuildable, will that be open space designation then?
Yeah, it would be identified as part of, if they did a subdivision, it would be a separate tract that they would have to, again, keep open and they would be having the maintenance on that well. If it was on a site plan, it would just be an area on the site plan that would basically be the same thing.
Okay, so there would be open space on that whole acre.
Yeah, it may not be active open space, but.
Well, and potentially.
Mhm.
I mean, don't know anything about this developer. He may have plans to develop the whole
Yeah.
13.75 acres and engineer it. And
Right, they have, at least initially, had 3 concepts that they drew up, none of which were even close to the high end or even the middle end of density that we were looking at. In part of our financial, it was much lower than, I think the highest that they had was 70, 75, somewhere in there. Units, yes.
Dave?
I wanted to thank Mitch and Rob and the rest of the staff for educating us on this. You've walked us through this to the point where I think most of the council is ready to make a decision on it. Thank you.
I'd like more information. I'd certainly like Paul and Brent to be able to hear the information that we heard as well. And in regards to letting the developer, I just feel that maybe we need to be a little bit more involved in some of these decisions to get the look of the city the way we want it to look, and the way that most of the population in the city probably wants it to look as well.
And the question I would ask is, how do you know that?
What's that?
How do you know how the majority of the city wants it?
Well, that's why they have 7 representatives here.
Yeah.
That
It's up to us to make the decision.
it is, yeah.
I like the planning council. The reason I'm on this council is because the planning council got overruled so many times by the city council that I objected, and the guy I was objecting to said, well, do something about it. Run for council. And I did. And I haven't been overturned by the council on that, in that area since. So it works.
I was just going to offer a comment. The general approach that's taken for the expression of the community's values about what development will look like in this state is not a project-by-project, customized review each project. We'll run into a lot of legal issues if that's what we do, and basically regulated development by development agreement. There's no certainty about what our standards are, and we'll know it when we see it for each project. We could get ourselves in quite a bit of trouble, and it could be expensive. So the notion is you cast your vision broadly with your comprehensive plan, and in that you set out the zones and say, here's the types of developments that we want in certain geography. And then you have a zoning code that has all the standards that you say it should meet. It is certainly a legitimate exercise of your policy prerogative to evaluate the comp plan. You can't do it every month, or there's only certain times that you can do that, because it's a big lift to amend your comprehensive plan. And you can certainly look at your zoning standards. And so I would submit that if there's concern that, gee, maybe this shouldn't be AR-16, or maybe we've got too much R-16 or R-30 or R whatever, the higher density zoning, that's a different question than this one project. This body, not necessarily you as individuals, but this body 10 or 12 years ago, whenever this was designated, that made the decision already that this should be that density, looking at the whole community. And then whenever the last time the zoning standards were updated for that zone, I don't know when that was when this body, again, different members, articulated the policy of what it should be like there. Adjustments can be made to that. So if that's something that the council wants to look at, that's a project that we can undertake. It's a broader thing. It would apply to all of the AR-16, or we would look at where all the AR-16 is, as opposed to trying to regulate by development agreement every time we have something that comes in. I think we really need to try to avoid doing that. There's a number of questions. In the meantime, if there's a majority of the council that wants to revisit those sorts of standards, and so there's hesitancy to bring a development in because you're unsure about whether or not it does meet the current vision of what this council would want. We can try to share as much information as we can and maybe do one more check-in with you, before we bring this for your action. But I'm kind of checking in to see, and we only have 5 council members here, so it's, I don't know.
Joyce?
I'm comfortable with this, but I would like to just know what kind of space they're required to have for play area, recreational area. But I'm comfortable with it as it is.
Dan?
So if we ask for like a review like you were talking about, would that be a significant setback as far as planning time? Would it affect this annexation thing that we're doing here now? What are we talking about as far as time? Or
If you wanted that before you initiated this, yes, that would be a setback in time. And it's not on Mitch's work plan right now to do a zoning study of our AR-16 zoning regulations, and it's not necessarily on the work plan, although we're doing a comprehensive plan update. We're way into that process. It hasn't, part of that hasn't been, should we reevaluate where our higher density residential zoning is? It's not on the portfolio right now, so we would have to work that in. We may or may not need help to do that. May or may not be costs associated with it. It's a bigger lift. So it would, and if you wanted that before you annex this, that would delay this for sure.
Dave?
Can we get a sense of the council that's present, whether or not Mitch should bring this next time? Brief us on the questions we've raised here and put it to a decision on the next meeting? I'm looking for a sense of the council.
I think it would be reasonable to address the things that we had questions on and then bring it maybe the next meeting.
yeah, if we didn't request this review or whatever at this time, when would we do it? I mean, when, it seems like this is the time to do it or not do it. Is that not so? I don't.
We could do it any time. It's just a question of what it will cost us to do it. We have Mitch, that's all we have internally, and that's a lot to have. Mitch does a great job. Okay, I want to make sure I'm clear with that, right? You'll probably hear me say this a lot of different times. A very small, very lean team, very competent and capable, but there's only so much lifting that they can do. So often we need to get some help. The quicker you want it, we would need to expend some resources. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier today is there was a $295,000 surplus in 2015 that has added to the reserve. There are some capital type projects that I think many council members were interested in, but just felt like, you know what, we're not able to fund those yet. We could put this into the mix. I don't think this is a $225,000 study like the bigger industrial thing that we're doing with the UGAs, but we can study this a little bit, and next time we come back, we can talk about what it might take to get that done and the timing of it.
Depending on what that is though, Mitch, does that change the comprehensive plans that we've submitted to the county?
My recommendation would be we're not changing anything before June 30th. Nothing changes. After that, we can have all kinds of discussions about what we want to do.
And that's the county's deadline.
That is
and
the
ours.
state
deadline.
State deadline,
Yes.
right.
When is
Now-
that?
June
June 30th.
Now, that would be to change the zoning at a macro level.
That's what I'm saying, if we get into this and all of a sudden we've got changes that are desired to be in there, everything else, our timing on that is as bad as it could be.
We will not change anything prior to June 30th. It will be.
It's impossible to
It
do.
will stay exactly the way it is.
We have to go all through
That's coming
SEPA.
back to you very soon to be adopted again.
What we could do, though, is change the zoning standards. That's a different animal.
Yes, it is.
You leave the zoning, the zoning designation as is, but you can nibble around on
What's required
on the
within it.
standards.
Does it give the developer more options, more flexibility?
Not necessarily, depends on what all your desires would be.
Anything that gives the developer more flexibility, I think Jennifer and I are probably together on this, we'd be happy to see. I know I would. And so I'd like to see this thing brought to the council next time around. We can kick it around all we want, we got all night to do it. But I don't think we need another 4 weeks to come to a decision.
Okay. We'll move forward accordingly. Mitch, you've got Parks Capital Facilities Plan and Transportation Capital Facilities Plan.
Correct.
Real quick, in deference to Michelle's concerns, I would advise my fellow council members prepare for a long meeting next time, because I assume she's gonna have a lot of questions for the staff, and I know they'll be ready to answer.
For me?
Well, any of those you can get to staff ahead of time are appreciated because they can have answers ready for you, so.
Yes, great idea. Staff coordination. In addition to everything else, Mitch is proficient with the iPad. I mean, this is a real accomplishment.
All right, so I have two amendments. These were initiated by Public Works, processed through, they are capital facility amendments. They are really limited in scope in each one. And so in looking at the parks plan, we have removed the Angelo Park language from the plan and added the special use downtown park designation language to the Parks Capital Facility Plan. And in your packet as well, in your packet for this evening as well is the plan itself that also has the tables in them associated with the project list and project list and capital project list and priority list, thank you. And so those are the changes that we have here, and then again, the map we added in the downtown there, we added the downtown park property to the map as well. And to go back to Dan's question, like I said, north and east is that other park that we identified up there, and that property. Yeah, oh, there's one up here too, right there, so those are the only amendments that we're looking at doing right now. The recommended action for this evening is to set a public hearing to take public testimony on March 14th at 7 p.m. through approval of the consent agenda. And moving, if there's questions.
I had one question. I read something, and I don't see it on this, it had the swimming hole
Yes.
crossed out.
Yep.
But so that's not what we're approving?
That is in here, that's on the project list,
Okay.
but there wasn't any other language changes within the document itself, it was just on the table, and I'm sorry, I didn't put the whole table into the presentation, but
Okay.
it is in the agenda, Bill. The table 7 is the list where we took off all the improvements for the Sandy swimming hole.
I thought we should still leave that there. I mean, it's not saying that it's something that's going to happen right now, but just leave it there for potential parking if, in the future. I know the council voted that down, but I think there's kind of no harm, no foul if it's just left there.
Okay, if those
Because
are,
there's a lot of people in the community that,
yeah, if that is the will of the council at the time that we have the hearing, we can leave that in there.
Back in?
Yeah, add it back in, by all means, that is something that, I'll make note of that in the hearing presentation discussion about that, and as part of the recommended action then would be either to modify that, to include that in there.
thank you.
Transportation.
Moving to transportation, again, we have two, really fundamentally two changes in this. This is in your packet, this is on page 24, oh, excuse me, page 25, the map. There's no changes to the map, but in the table for the property associated with the A Street, we made that project TIF eligible. And so the tables on page 24 in your packet and page 41 in your packet are modified to show that instead of not being TIF eligible, now it's TIF eligible. And not to be confused, that's A Street, and then on the other plan map within your packet, which is on page 29, this is South A Street. We added that section in, which would be the pedestrian connection between the Ports Trail and our downtown trail, and again, making that TIF eligible as well. So there's no changes to the TIF rate associated with these changes. It was just easier to give you the whole document instead of pulling out separate sections and making those changes. Our consultant was great and just updated the whole document, so it will repeal and replace that whole plan. And so, again, that recommended action is for you to set a public hearing tonight as part of the consent agenda for March 14th.
On that slide you just had, 29 of 45, I mentioned this before you weren't here to David, and he told me, I can't remember why you said that it was already incorporated, or that ped bike improvement, I feel like it should be along Crown Road to Woodburn there, as part of the potential for pedestrian bike improvements.
On the road plan, it's already includes that, right?
In our plan.
On the road plan? Oh, in the road plan, yes.
Right, I think, and I'm just gonna ask Rob to confirm it. So there are two elements. There's I always call it the road plan. I don't know what the official name of it is. And then there's the bike and ped plan. And Crown Road is on
Oh, the CIP list.
the list, the 6-year tip or whatever it is. And the identified improvements for Crown are listed here, and they include bike and ped. So it's,
Yeah.
Is that on the document I have?
It's actually on page 24 of the document you
Okay.
have. It's item I, it's Crown Road 283rd,
Okay.
widened to 3-lane arterial plus bike lanes and sidewalks, coordinate with Camas to extend improvements further north.
Okay.
now recalling one other part of our conversation, you had, and just to follow on that, and then recalling another part of the conversation. So the bike ped improvements map is really when those are standalone improvements on existing roads, and there isn't going to be a road improvement
Okay.
associated with it.
Okay.
There are fairly significant bike and ped improvements that are identified on the road plan because the road's not improved yet. So that's, Crown is.
Okay, yeah, I was trying, I know you told me something, I just couldn't remember why it wouldn't be graphically represented on that map, but now I understand, okay.
It's when it stands alone. You had also commented about, and it's hard to zoom in on these, but you had also commented about the notion of bike and ped improvements kind of in the neighborhoods east of Crown as those develop and meander their way up there until you'd make some crossing at an appropriate point.
Right, yeah, that was just a suggestion that I thought might be more cost-effective because there's such drop-offs on that road. It seemed like to expand it would be, like you said, a phenomenal amount of money.
It's expensive, yeah.
Yeah.
The price tag for Crown Road improvements is not small. And the response on that is, as we've annexed, but as we would annex others, and as if it's residential development, subdivision development that goes in, our standards require curb, gutter, and sidewalk in those neighborhoods. And so you get that pedestrian connectivity ambiently in the development. So you don't necessarily identify that inside. And when you look at that PED map, you don't see within the individual neighborhoods necessarily, where there's new development that's going to happen. You don't see that because it's new development and the new standards require it. If it's existing development and it doesn't have it,
Okay.
we would want to identify it here. And it is the mayor's goal someday, if we could ever figure out a way to pay for it, to have sidewalks on every street in town,
At
I think
least
it's-
one side.
at least on one side.
That'd be great.
And we're nibbling away at that as we can. In fact, we'll talk about that a little bit in the next presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the transportation updates? Okay. Steve, you gonna take the lead on the,
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is an update that we wanted to present regarding some public improvements that we've talked about with the council before during some of our strategic planning sessions. And in fact, there's some funding set aside for what we'll be talking about in this presentation in the 2016 budget. So we thought it was germane because this project will be coming before you here in the next several months for your action to get moving on. And it's a partnership project with the school district, and we have the superintendent and the facilities director here, Mike and Joe, whom you all know, but thank you for being with us, guys. So we'll do a little bit of a background. This is a project that's been in the works for quite some time, more than 10 years. We'll talk about what the current projects are, and then we'll give you kind of a broad overview of our Safe Routes to School program in the vicinity, not the entire city, but in the vicinity of the projects we're about to talk about. Then look at what we have to do to keep moving, our next steps, and any questions and discussion that you might have, Council. So we're talking about specifically the Schmid ball fields north of Evergreen, east of 45th. You're hopefully all familiar with our ball fields there. And the Washougal School District administrative site where they have an existing administrative building and maintenance building. And there's a number of interlocal agreements, 3 actually, that we have with the district with respect to this property. I think it's good to clarify, I think you all know this, but it's good to clarify for any other interested party that the school district owns all of the property where their administrative building is, where their maintenance facility is, and where these ball fields are. The city does not own any of these properties. In 2003, there was an initiation of a project, a partnership project, if you would, to develop sports fields at the Schmid location. And at the time, it also referenced the fact that maybe it would happen in the field that exists now just to the west of the existing Jemtegard school site. There was some notation in the interlocal about that. I just thought that was interesting. That's obviously not what happened, but it was noted in 2003. In 2005, that interlocal was updated. And it was updated because there was more information. The 2003 was very high-level terms. In 2005, the terms became very much more specific, talked about how it would develop, how it would operate, who would schedule it, who would maintain it. And it talked about, and this is the key component, or a key component of our presentation this evening, frontage improvements, if you would, street and sidewalk improvements, and the fact that we would share the costs of those as partners, because when that site develops, just like any other development, you do frontage improvements. And as you know, there aren't any out there right now. And then in 2008, the interlocal agreement was again updated, and each time it superseded the prior, and it reflected the fact that field number 1 was completed. There had been some Recreation and Conservation Office, RCO grant funds that had been secured. A lot of requirements come, strings are attached to that grant funding. 25-year term to the interlocal agreement, and it continues to identify a cost sharing for the frontage improvements. So that's background on where we are, and the last time that we engaged in agreement was in 2008. And then since that time, there's been a second field built. Developments that have happened, in '04, the district built their administrative building. At the time, as is usual, frontage improvements were required. However, this was in the beginning stages of a multi-phased endeavor at this site. And so those were deferred. Instead of having them installed at the time, the decision was made by both parties to defer those till later stages. So that's why there aren't sidewalks or half-street improvements out in front of the administrative building. That was a decision that was made in 2004. In 2005, the first field was approved, and again, because of a broader and larger project that was in the works in later phases, which I'll describe in a moment, those improvements were deferred, and that's why you don't see any frontage improvements along immediately south of the first field, and there's no sidewalks, or the half-street improvements weren't made. And then again, in 2009, the second field was approved, and again, the street and sidewalk improvements were deferred. And that deferral was really tied to the fact that a much larger project was envisioned for this site. Years ago, I don't know when exactly it was, the district had been considering, I believe it's called the Kerr property, just to the north of where the administrative site and where these ball fields are, large parcel that the district owns there, was identified as a future school site. So you can imagine with a future school going in, exactly how the access would go, what would we need out in the street, how many turn lanes, how many lanes would you need to have it? You know, it made some sense to kind of punt these frontage improvements, because you wouldn't want to build something and then they would become superfluous or redundant and you'd have to rip them out or do something different. So there was some, you know, some rationale, if you would, to deferring these improvements until you kind of knew what the build-out was going to be at the site. So that's why those decisions were made in '04, '05, and '09 to defer that. Fast forward to today, and we have some current projects. And as you know, and thank you to the district voters for their approval of a bond, a significant bond, which is a great thing for the community. There are a number of improvements that are pending in the district, one of which is the relocation of their transportation facility from East Street, on the more west side of East Street, to co-locate and consolidate for efficiencies where they're at on their admin site. So good move by the district in that regard, and that's where they've identified the transportation facility to go, and that's pending approval. But we're also aware, and I didn't put it on the slide here, but everyone is aware of the fact that I think that at the Jemtegard site, there will be 2 brand new schools at the Jemtegard site, one replacement 6-8 and a new K-5. Great news for the community. Very important and significant improvements at the Jemtegard site. But what that means is the district, in making that decision to move there, and that decision was made within the last several years, the Kerr site's not a school site. It's not identified for a school site anymore. So the ball field improvements and this transportation facility, that's what's going to happen now at the site. So now with these improvements going in is the time where the deferring of the improvements stops, and it's time to talk about putting the improvements in, pursuant to our agreement, because we know what's going to happen now. And we know what's, maybe more importantly, we know what's not going to happen. And namely, that is there's not going to be a school facility on the Kerr property. We don't know what will happen with that. So there are some improvements, and pursuant to our agreement with the district and our partnership, the improvements are to be cost shared. One of the things, and I've got some diagrams and maps later in the presentation so we can take a look at it. One of the improvements is a shared use parking lot. It's part of the existing gravel parking lot that serves the ball fields. The very easternmost portion of that lot is going to be improved to today's standards for parking lots, and that will be employee parking for the district. But when employees are not parked there, our patrons, city constituents, will be parking there when they use the fields. It's a joint use parking lot. That's not specifically identified in the interlocal, if you would, but in the partnership, that's a joint use facility. We should share the costs, and so we'll share the costs of putting that in. Pursuant to the interlocal agreement, any improvements that are required because of the development. So when you develop a piece of property, you're required to do frontage improvements for the half of the street that fronts your property. So here we're calling it the north half street frontage improvements. North half street frontage improvements will be done at this site, and we will share that cost with the school district pursuant to the terms of the interlocal agreement. We're still working out exactly, what the exact scope of the project will be and what those exact costs will be. So this is just a presentation. We'll be back one or two more times as we continue to move through the project, ultimately with hopefully council approving contracts for our share of that work. On the south half, what we're thinking, Rob and Trevor and I, on the south half, even though it's not required by the development, our ball field development, their transportation facility development, to make improvements on the south portion of Evergreen Way out there. If we're going to be out there and that street's going to be ripped up, then it's probably not unknown to you that that street is problematic. It's old. Economies of scale, today's dollars, it would make sense for us if we can do it to go ahead and make improvements on the south side. That would be all a capital facilities project for us, not related to the development. That's something that we would, that wouldn't be cost shared, but it would be done at the same time. And then just to touch base very briefly on something that the council is very interested in, that is, keeping the momentum going out at the fields and making further improvements. We're still conceptually working on all of that to package that up so we can think about how we would fund that. And just to give you some sense of some of our preliminary effort, this doesn't include parking lots or lighting in the parking lots or any of those types of improvements, or a third ball field, all of which need to be done there. But maybe an initial phase that the council's talked about is restrooms and a snack building and all the ancillary improvements with that. Concrete block, metal roof construction, you don't do those out of wood for obvious reasons. It's about $350,000 just to give you a feel for that. So more news later on that, but just to let you know, that's something that is on our radar and we're working on. Of course, out at the Jemtegard site, I mentioned this. There's the K5 new and replacement 6.8. It's pending. They're still pending approvals with the county for that. There's going to be some transportation improvement out there. There'll be a turn lane as you're heading eastbound to get into the Jemtegard site, so that'll be very, very useful. And I have a map to show these things. There's connectivity to the Safe Routes to School project that we have coming from the Sunset neighborhood. And again, I'll have a map in just a minute to show you all of that. So these two projects are going to usher in a number of public improvements which will be beneficial to our mutual constituencies. This slide is much easier to see up on the screen than it probably is on the hand copy. And thank you to the team in Public Works, specifically Jason, our engineering tech, for putting these together. But on this, you can see the southeast. You can see the existing Jemtegard School and its track. You can see the Schmidt Fields in the southwest, the administrative and maintenance buildings there. And you can see the southern portion of the Sunset neighborhood. So the area in green, the squiggly lines in green and the big rectangle in green out in front of the Schmidt Fields, those are the improvements that we were talking about sharing. So there's road improvements that will occur from 45th to in the vicinity of the driveway there. And the north half of those road improvements will be shared cost with the district, and the southern portion will be our cost as part of the project. And then the squigglier line is the sidewalk portion or the pedestrian path portion of the north half frontage improvements. The idea there is to try to have kids be removed a little bit from Evergreen Way and have this path meander just outside of the outfield fences. You kind of have a feel what that looks like. There's some flat area there that could be done. And those will extend all the way to the edge of the district's property. So we're getting the pedestrian connectivity as far as we can. We don't own other property. The dark blue rectangles toward the north out front of the neighborhood there, those are sidewalks that were put in when that subdivision was developed. They were required to do their half-street improvements, so there's existing sidewalks there, so that's great. They exist. And then the light blue is our Safe Routes to School project that's funded by the state, small match from the city, and that provides connectivity from those neighborhoods to the north to the Jemtegard site. That's a great project. We're working with the district, delivering that, and they're a partner in that. The state is the primary funder for that project. You see, though, quite a bit of red there. And if you think about just connectivity for pedestrian safety and safe routes to school in that vicinity, you can see that there are some unfunded gaps there. The shortest segment of that is in front of the cemetery property just to the east of the administrative building, and then a couple of private properties that are in the county in between Sunset View and the Jemtegard site. And I don't have their Jemtegard site plan to show you here, because we're not here to talk about the details of their site plan, but I will say that they're putting a new driveway in and access into the property right there at the western portion of their property. So our goal will be at some point, working with the district and the county, to try to change all of the red color on this map to a blue color and get it done. But what we can do now, pursuant to our interlocal agreement, is take care of the green, and we'll get that done. And we'll do it as cost effectively as we can and put in a good project on behalf of our mutual constituents. So that kind of gives you a feel for what's happening there. One of the things we wanted to show you more generally is this isn't the only area in this vicinity where safe routes are important and where we're trying to deliver safe pedestrian access. There's the rest of Evergreen all the way to 32nd. And so this next slide shows, it doesn't go all the way to 32nd, but it's from 34th to the western boundary of the Schmidt Field site. From 32nd to 34th, we have existing sidewalk with existing development, so we didn't need to show that. You can see a little piece of blue sticking out there. Then you see the yellow. That's a TIB, Transportation Improvement Board. We received funding for that this last session. It's another good project, piece by piece. We're getting our sidewalks taken care of on Evergreen Way. So that's a couple of blocks or so, and that's very helpful. You see a pretty good sized gap there. And then you see intermittent blue and red. Anytime new development comes in the more modern era, if you would, half-street improvements are required, and the developer puts in sidewalks, and so we get them when we can that way, and then when we can fund it. So between Safe Routes and TIB or other city funding, we will convert all of that red to blue at some point in the future. That's our plan. And then it'll connect to the green that you see there, and then hopefully someday we can do the red all the way down Evergreen there, and then tie into their on-site pedestrian access and their safe pedestrian access all the way into the school campus. So that's the goal, the mutual goal of the partners. And then the last drawing to show, this shows the high school campus, the Gauze campus. And you can see Evergreen on the south, and you can see J at the north, and then 32nd coming down on the left or the west. In the middle there is 34th, and then 39th on the right. You can see the existing sidewalks at the Safeway project and the existing sidewalks on 32nd, both sides, major arterial. Really proud of this project in the middle there on 34th, the light blue. That is a recently funded Safe Routes to School project. Next slide shows the dollar amounts associated with all of this. We're getting a safe route all the way from the school campuses up there, all the way down to Evergreen. It's an excellent project and a tribute to the team for achieving that grant for us. You can see where that ties into the TIB project on Evergreen. But again, you see quite a bit of red there, notably on J and notably on 39th. Those are unfunded projects. Those are important projects. So that gives you kind of a feel for the Jemtegard, Gauze, Washougal, and Excelsior High School safe routes portfolio, if you would. Quite a bit of it is in place. Quite a bit of it is not in place. And we keep chipping away at it. Costs to do all of this are not insignificant. This table here shows you all of the costs. It's about $16 million that's unfunded still. Now that big $9 million one is includes street improvements on Evergreen Way. I didn't break that out. And know that part of that 9.1 million is going to get taken care of out in front of the ball fields this year. So that's helpful. But the rest of them, fairly expensive projects. You can see the $540,000 funded Safe Routes project on 34th, big project. And you can see the Jemtegard Trail Safe Routes project, $640,000 project. So we've got almost $1.2 million in Safe Routes money being deployed in our community by the state. So we'll keep at it, but it's very expensive. So the next steps are working with our partner, the district. We'll finalize the details and the estimates for all these improvements that will happen at the ball fields. We will need to, again, update the interlocal agreement to consummate these details. For the cost sharing, we have to work out, who will build what parts and all of that, and any other updates that are necessary to how we operate and maintain those facilities. And then the governing bodies, this council and the school board will need to, of course, approve that interlocal agreement. And then off we go, award our contracts, get under construction, and then moving into the future, our efforts together to try to get safe routes and other funding to take care of all those sidewalk needs and keep working on the Schmid Fields to make that an even better amenity in our community. They're going to be doing that turn lane. We're going to do that Safe Routes project to the Sunset neighborhood. Those are all in process. And hopefully the county's going to be a partner with this, because some of this is in the county. They have to be the applicant for the Safe Routes. So we'll keep chasing this and do the best we can together with our partners at the district to make it happen. And I went over 6:30, I apologize.
The thing I need to know wasn't covered. How much of that 16 million is going to come from the city?
Well, all of that 16 million is going to come from the city unless we can secure grant funding from the Transportation Improvement Board or Safe Routes to School. We can use TIF for maybe not all, but most of these, because they're on our plan and they're TIF eligible.
Traffic impact fee?
Traffic impact fees, excuse me. Yes, thank you. General fund dollars.
How much general fund dollars?
Don't know until we go out and look for grants. This is the dilemma of our entire Transportation Capital Facilities Plan. This is just one small little piece, as you know, of our Transportation Capital Facilities Plan. It is an unfunded plan. Our Parks Capital Facilities Plan is an unfunded plan. We go out and get grants and do the best we can to deliver these, and then when development happens, the developer builds improvements. And so obviously that takes burden off the general fund or our traffic impact fee fund. We are not proposing any of the projects on this list. We don't have the funding to propose them. It's just to give you a feel for the types of expense that is involved into delivering projects that were on that map. And that's just one corner of our community. But it's a very important corner because we've got three schools there, 3 of the 4,
Or
or 4, right?
4 of the 5?
Yeah, 4 of the 5, so. I don't know if Mike ran all the way back over here from Vancouver at a meeting just to share with you their thoughts on safe routes to school. I don't know if the council's open to indulging a few comments from
Yes.
Mike, even though it's past 6:30.
Definitely. Come on up.
Don't be shy. We know you're not.
Thank you for running back here, Mike.
It's okay. It's important that I be here to at least listen and share so that as we move forward as you know, agencies, as to your point, sharing the same constituents, that we have an understanding of what each other is at least desiring to do long-term. You know what we're desiring to do right now immediately with the projects. And, you know, the work ahead of us here in terms of some shared responsibility. And to Dave's point, regarding the red, particularly there, I think the best way to frame it is that collectively between the city and the county and the district that we advocate and look for opportunities to find a way to get that covered, whether or not it's other safe routes to school grants. I'm not familiar with the nuances of those in terms of the frequency, but certainly we're more than willing to participate in and advocate for that. I mean, why wouldn't we? In terms of the students and the families that we serve. So it's just a matter of, so when you do that, what's the timeline and who's going to pay for it? And and you're asking the same questions that I'm going to ask and that our board will ask as well. And most importantly, what we can be is the greatest advocate for our kids and families relative to these. And to Dave's point, we'll chip away at it. It's the best we can do. Are there questions about our project? I know that you have.
It's a quiet group.
I know.
I know,
Dinner
I mean,
time.
it's at the end of the evening, it's dinner time, right?
It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear what we need.
Yes, it is.
This is not-
Sure.
These are great slides.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully part of the way through some of this stuff, even if we can, to steal the term from the State Department of Transportation now on practical design, that kind of stuff, even if we can do some things that get us through a few years that maybe aren't, you know, full improvements, full concrete sidewalks, all that type of stuff, we can come up with something that creates some safe refuge for the kids and the adults that are walking out there or biking out there too.
Yeah, in my office, fronts the street there, and I mean, the majority of our kids are either transported by bus, or certainly their parents bring them too, but, I'm a Papa Bear, and a couple of times Joe's even seen me get up from my, ironically, on a Wednesday during our construction meetings, I get up from my seat and watch a kid, and it's hard to tell from a distance. I know sometimes it's a teenager in there walking across the track. Once in a while, we do see some kids walking along the street. So we have all the right reasons here. We need to be doing something about it.
Is there a distance for busing the students into the school or the ones that can walk? I mean, is there some sort of rule about that?
Well, I don't want to rely on that rule because that's the rule that I lived under at a previous place. So there are some guidelines I would be.
Do you get many walkers? I mean, to
jump
the
the guard?
mhm.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and spend some time with Jesse to really get a sense of how many kids do walk. I don't see a lot of them coming along there. Every once in a while, I see kids there. But I'm not sure how many are in the back neighborhood there that would eventually be served. But, that's about communication with our constituents and helping them understand, when it does become constructed, then helping them begin to see that this is the route that we want them to take, or here's a new opportunity. And I would venture to say there are kids living in that neighborhood, it's a guess, but who are living in that neighborhood who are taking the bus now that would probably otherwise just walk on a new pathway.
Take the route.
When is the completion time for the Aqua portion then, the SRTS?
We're planning, it'll probably be open by early next year.
So if and when that comes into development, will you then designate those areas as walk zones to the school, and will that alleviate the school from any costs in busing? I know in Camas, they have walk zones where it
Right.
has adequate sidewalks and it's within a half mile. Will that end up saving money, and will you be able to designate those areas
I'll
walk
have to go
zones?
back. I think that comes
Okay.
back to Joyce's question. I don't know what our, Joe, you're not familiar with our walk zone radius of a school. I mean, yeah, I used to operate off of a mile, but I don't think that would be necessarily the case here. I'd have to go back, but there, like I said, there are certainly some kids that are gonna say, well, I'm not gonna take the bus, I'll just walk down the path.
Well, you certainly have kids that are going to Hathaway and going to the high school, going to Gauze that aren't headed that direction, where you're gonna need to have buses in there anyway.
Right,
Just not for quite as long or as many.
yeah. And certainly with a new elementary coming online, that'll shift things, because now there will very well be kids, depending upon how our new boundary alignment happens, and, we have the fun of that coming up in the next year or two, depending upon when we can build. But there'll certainly be, elementary kids now in that neighborhood too, that would otherwise probably just walk, so.
Your comment about the kids that you see on the railroad tracks every once in a while reminds me, I'll make sure and touch base with Burlington Northern on their, I don't remember what the name of the program is. It's a rail safety program where they have folks that come out and interface with the school district and the students directly for schools that are close to, and certainly Hathaway and these two certainly fall into that, about not being on the tracks, and they've been an entire program that's directed just towards that, so.
Okay.
I don't think they've ever done that out here that we'd heard of or that they had remembered.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I've only seen it a couple times, but a couple times is enough to get your attention. We hear about the horror stories, and we don't want that in our neighborhood. We don't want it anywhere, but.
Michelle?
Are there fields, baseball, softball fields, or anything like that at the middle school there?
No, they're all soccer, and the athletic field are track and football field.
So do you assume that those kids, if there is sidewalks leading from the school, will utilize those at all, or there'll be programming for that, or?
Well, right now, most of those fields are, contracted use after school or on the weekends, so, and we'll be using some of the upper field space, for, for PE and for recreation time, but.
The middle schools don't utilize those fields then during, like, well, I guess there's no softball team.
There's no
middle
softball.
schools,
It's
so-
primarily football and track
Yeah.
and PE, because, baseball and soccer are pretty much,
High school based.
recreational or club sports. Those are contracted.
This potentially does, and not potentially, it does, it's just a question of when the timing is. These improvements on the frontage also open us up to be able to hopefully successfully, with the school district, petition for more RCO grant dollars for field number 3 as well. The only reason we've deferred that is that massive cost of all the improvements out there in order to put that last one in. But really, for the recent past, that's what has held us up from triggering that.
I have a question about that, everything, that third field that you're talking about. Is it, I was talking to somebody with the baseball club out there, and they said if we put lighting on the fields, the current fields that we have there, that they wouldn't need a third field for baseball per se, because they could have night games, and we could potentially make that a soccer field. So,
It's, I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
was-
Yeah, I don't know where. it
or
comes
another
from.
sport of some sort. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
baseball or softball, it could be a different sport.
I think you
Really.
need to keep it baseball, though. I mean, just having played out there, that's a field that all the little guys play on, because all the big guys are using the other field.
Right now, there are
So
two
all-
sets of bleachers out there for.
The
probably-
T-ball, so all the little T-ball teams
They
are
play on
out.
the grass anyway,
Yeah.
it's better for them.
So you'd be taking all those kids that are playing T-ball, and they'd have nowhere to I think a
So
different
they're
place.
playing
should-
with it's just out in the grass?
Yeah, out on the
They don't-
grass,
They don't
yeah.
have any field?
Nothing, yeah.
T-ball, yeah, you just
Yeah.
set up some, these are really young kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Four or
well, I just
five.
know that we're taking away soccer fields from the Angelo
think we should.
Park area. And I thought, well, maybe, you know, if we considered putting a soccer field there instead of a baseball field, that might alleviate.
Yeah,
some
part of it is, I'm just not familiar with the level of use in terms of, so do they, you know, I'm not sure. I haven't lived through a season yet out there to know.
They're all
So,
used, they're
yeah,
all used,
I
and they're
would-
fighting for time just to
Sure,
get a little
sure.
piece of grass out there.
Yeah,
Or you're playing in the cornfield near Pendleton with 4-foot-high grass. So I mean, I think if you were looking for another, you need to look at another spot maybe
Yeah.
for soccer, because it's the only mowed field right there, other, yeah.
my experience with soccer fields and baseball is that, oh, that's right, that's a good point. We're gonna add a third field up above it. Jim.
Soccer field.
Yeah,
Oh.
or down below.
Oh,
it.
good.
Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think certainly as we go through that process, whenever that happens, we want to make sure and build whatever the most needed facility is. If we don't, also look at the north side of that off the parking lot and see if there are areas that we can carve
Yeah,
out of
maybe
there
that's
that
a-
are usable.
Mm. Clear a lot of trees.
Currently, trees make benches, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions for Mike? Any questions for Dave or Rob? Okay. With that, we'll adjourn this meeting for a short 15 minutes, be back here at 7 o'clock for